Hello, everyone. Today, I would like to record a video and talk about something that is very close to me, my personal experience, and also my experience as a practitioner with borderline personality disorder.
To start with, let's just I've got my Google pages open here, and I'm just going to read what BPD is, just kind of a short sort of summary so that we're all on the same page. Although, of course, if you're watching this video, it probably means you already know what that is and what symptoms it presents. But just for completion's sake, I would like to make sure we're all on the same baseline here. So, borderline personality disorder is a mental. This is what an AI overview in Google says. Is a mental illness that affects a person's ability to regulate their emotions. It can impact how someone feels about themselves and their relationships. Borderline BPD is a mental health condition. People with BPD have extreme mood swings, unstable relationships, and trouble controlling their emotions. They have a higher risk of suicide and self-destructive behavior. Talk therapy is the main treatment for borderline personality disorder. And when it comes to symptoms, of course, there's a lot more to it than that, but this is just like a short summary. And in terms of the symptoms, it can range, obviously it can range from person to person, but this is kind of the general overview. Unstable sense of self, unstable relationships, impulsive behavior, fear of abandonment, dissociation, anxiety, anger, or depression, difficulty regulating emotions, occasional self-destructive behavior, avoidance. And of course, doesn't actually, self-destructive behavior, I was going to say self-harm, which comes under that. So I used to tick every one of these boxes for a long time. And of course, with in mental health spaces, what's really difficult is that a lot of these things, they cross over with other conditions. What I want to maybe start with is going back to the definition of it, or like the explanation of what it is. The biggest, if you like, problem with borderline is the inability to control your emotions or inability to control your impulsive behavior. And what is interesting is that the only form of therapy, the best form of talk therapy currently recognized by medical field is DBT, which is, I believe it stands for dialectical behavior therapy. And what's really interesting is that it's when I looked into it, I recognized how similar in a lot of ways it is to the practice that I follow, namely embodied processing. And what's interesting to me about all of that is that when you look at standard therapy or dialectical behavioral therapy or any kind of talk therapy, they obviously they kind of directed at different parts of your brain and how you regulate yourself, etc. But none of them include the body into the equation. None of them. Unless a practitioner who's a licensed therapist, counselor, psychologist, unless they're also trained in somatic work, none of them bring the body into the question or equation. And why I say this is interesting is because this is based, it seems to be based on the belief still that your emotions reside in your brain and in the way you think. And of course, I do know that with especially with borderline, but also with every other mental health condition, the way you think absolutely 100% will affect how you feel. No doubt about that. So the premise in this work is essentially that if you change the way you think or the way you react or respond to certain triggers, and again they believe that comes from your conscious choice. If you change that, or if you manage it, control it, then your symptoms of borderline will diminish or at least be managed. Now, as I said, a lot of that, for example, with DBT, there's a lot of similarities with, for example, the somatic work that I do, which is why I can see that a lot of the advice and the techniques that they give in this therapy will be useful. But because the body piece is completely missed out, we're missing a huge chunk of what can actually help people with borderline, which is what I discovered when I started doing this therapy myself. In terms of my symptoms, so if I talk about my personal experience, after a while of doing this therapy, I've been doing this therapy for over 2 years now, regularly, like every week almost. What I've noticed is that there was a shift in my symptoms, as well as a diminishment of my symptoms. And what I have learned is that over time is that borderline is actually very often misdiagnosed and confused with complex PTSD. And if we look at the chart, again, I've seen this a long time ago, but I just pulled it up again. You can draw it as a Venn diagram because there's a lot of overlapping symptoms between complex PTSD and borderline. And what I've realized is that over time, my symptoms shifted more so into the CPTSD spectrum, and some of them have disappeared altogether. Wait, when I say disappeared, my symptoms come back and they can get worse when I'm under stress and when I am not doing the things that my emotions requiring me to do. I'm not talking about reacting to my emotions. I'm not talking about the impulsive behavior. Emotions are a guide. And what happens with borderline and with some other mental health conditions like that is that our guidelines get skewed and confused. What it means is that because growing up, when we experience a range of emotions, like every human does, we have no understanding inbuilt. No child has any understanding inbuilt in them, or how to process those emotions or what they mean, and so we learn that through parents and caregivers and people around us, through observing them, but also through how they respond to us. And if we don't learn secure attachment and we don't learn that our emotions are safe to experience, that is where that skewing can start to happen. From my experience of going through the process of unraveling a lot of my own emotions, there's something I learned called overcoupling. We also call it velcroing of emotions. And in my experience, that has been a huge issue in me processing my emotions, which has then been causing me a lot of overwhelm. And that overwhelm hence was causing me to impulsively react and engage in impulsive destructive behavior. So this is kind of where I want to kind of introduce this idea to start to restructure how we think about emotions as a whole. Because with borderline, and was my experience, we are often demonizing our emotions. And I understand why, because on the surface, it looks like our emotions are causing us a lot of pain. But what is really happening is that our emotions are our experience. And of course, with trauma, it's not as simple as saying that, but let's just strip it back a little bit. Emotions is what we're experiencing. The problem is not our experience. The problem is that we don't know how to process our experience. The problem is that our experiences get overlaid and like become like an onion. There's layers to it. And the more layers there are, the more confusing it becomes to unravel it and process it and look at it and feel it all. Coupled with a very low capacity to deal with any of it, it creates a lot of dysregulation and stress, which then results into impulsive actions because we have no idea what to do with any of this. what body work allows you to do, somatic work, and any kind of somatic therapy or practices, not any kind, but specifically, nervous system informed, trained practitioners who work with the body and the nervous system. What it helps you do is to start to, tiniest step at a time, dip your toe into that big knot of experience and pain. You can always call it like a tiny bit of exposure therapy, but it's not really like that. It's more like, if you imagine that all of that pain is like an ocean, and you're sitting at the beach and you're looking at that ocean, and sometimes you just get thrown into that ocean and you have no idea how to swim, and you don't have a ship or a boat to rely on, you're going to be drowning, right? And so what we're doing with EP is we're essentially dipping our toe in the water and saying, oh, that feels a bit uncomfortable, I'm going to step back out. And then the next time we feel okay, we dip our toe in again. And maybe next time we're like, okay, well, this feels okay, but I can't go any further. It's fine, we step back out. And we do this tiniest step at a time. We teach our body that it is eventually going to be safe to step into the water a little bit deeper and a little bit deeper, until we're no longer scared of going into the water, because we're not only are stepping into the water, we have now built a whole bloody ship that can take us into the ocean, and we feel safe to do so. Because again, as I said, the emotions themselves are not a problem. The problem is that we don't know how to process and be with the experience of those emotions. Change of background, I'm in a different location, recording on a different day, continuing to record. So I think maybe the way I'll go forward in this video, for now at least, is I want to talk about my experience with somatic work and how it helped me in my symptoms. So I will talk about the symptoms and then the parts of the somatic therapy that have helped me with those symptoms, that are kind of universal or at least very common amongst people who have the diagnosis of borderline. So the first thing that's really important is that it did always feel as though I'm talking about the bad episodes, when I was experiencing bad episodes. What really helped me with those in the first place is to understand on the biological level in my body what was actually happening. Because every single time I was suffering, I was in my head and I was consumed by self-destructive thoughts. And those thoughts were there because I was experiencing a lot of discomfort in my body as well as in my mind. It could have been triggered by something. It could also happen just on a seemingly random day. So a huge problem of me processing, being in, feeling, living my experience was that I didn't understand what the hell was going on. And that is where somatic therapy has hugely, hugely helped me, because I realized that the experience I was having, the suffering I was experiencing, the suffering itself was in my head, but the pain was in my body. The experience of discomfort was in my body, in my nervous system, which was then affecting everything else, my hormones, my mood, my physical energy levels, everything. So when I was able to strip it back and think, oh my gosh, okay, so a body actually plays a huge role in all of this experience right now, it really helped me to actually process some of my guilt and shame over what I was going through, and finally be able to take some control and do something about it, as well as simply just having a little bit more compassion towards myself, because I knew that, oh, this was happening not because, I was a bad person or like I was choosing this. It was happening, not I couldn't do anything about it at the time. I'll come back to kind of the reasons why this is really happening a little bit later. So in terms of other parts where somatic work has really helped is with something that I have later understood as to be merging. So the way I was experiencing merging, what I've later understood to be merging, is really just an experience of not feeling myself in my body, but rather essentially attaching to, like, you can call it like a virus almost, attaching myself to something else to survive or to feel an essence of me. I needed other people and I needed to feel something and not be dissociated. So I would merge with my experiences, mostly not even experiences, but the beliefs of my experiences. I would merge with ideas of who I thought I was, merge with there's something wrong with me, merge with the feeling of depression, feeling of feeling suicidal, feeling shame, feeling guilt, feeling rage, all of these things. I would not be able to look at these as emotions. I would see them as me. I am these things rather than I am feeling these things. That's number one. And number two, I would merge with other people. And this is where the problems with relationships with people with BPD have. It's kind of not enough to just call it codependency. It's kind of beyond codependency in a way, but presents itself like a codependent dynamic where we start to merge with boundaries of other people, with lifestyles of other people, with perceptions of other people, and we completely lose ourselves. Well, it's kind of hard to say whether we lose ourselves because we never really even had ourselves in the first place. So this experience of essentially kind of attaching ourselves to the other person to survive, and as well as attaching ourselves to our beliefs and feelings, is what I collectively call merging, and what we call in this therapy merging, which in essence means I am becoming the thing, or I am becoming the person, another person outside of myself. The way somatic work has helped me work through this pattern, and continues to help me, because it's definitely not fully, I haven't fully healed this pattern, but the progress has been immense. To even be able to see it play out and not engage with it has been a massive shift. And the way it's helped me specifically is in practicing merging and distancing. This is actually one of the techniques in the work that I do. It's called merging and distancing. And there's specific tools and practices you can do so that you actually get an experience of how it feels. Not just cognitively understand, I don't need to merge or I need to distance myself. These are just thoughts. How do you actually do it? How does it feel to do the thing? So we start to understand that when we practice it. And this was what really helped me. And it wasn't a mental exercise. It was partially a mental exercise, but most importantly, the huge focus was on what am I experiencing in my body as I'm doing this mental exercise, so that I can attune myself to how it feels, so that later on in real life, right, not in the session space, but in real life, in the rest of my life, I can apply it, so that then it becomes a habit, so that then it becomes a normal, habitual thing that I don't even need to think about. That's one part of it. And of course, the huge aspect of borderline that this helps with is the fear of abandonment. Because what is implied in this understanding of like merging and distancing, if we're saying I'm distancing from something, what is it? What is the I that is distancing? What is the I that is merging? And we're not just philosophically thinking about it, we again are feeling it. We're in the process and in the experience of it. What is the I? Not some kind of societal labels, not some kind of parental labels, not the labels that we have put on ourselves, but the experience of feeling, of I. The whole process of healing your nervous system, which is the primary thing that we do in somatic work, entails meeting all these different parts and recognizing that they are parts of me. So all of them are me, but none of them individually are me. So it becomes a kind of we're going from therapy space to really kind of a spiritual space where we start to recognize that there was a fracture and a rupture in the essence of self, right? In what you felt you were. And that is where all of this disturbance comes from, as well as the dysregulated nervous system. And as we start to heal our nervous system, we start to recognize all of these different parts that got fractured off, and they start to come back and take back their places in ourselves that were always theirs to take. But in the process of trauma, what happens is we push a lot of these parts away.